Archaeologists and scientists know more about the world around us than most of us, but it doesn't mean that they know everything. Sometimes a discovery will be made that confuses and mystifies even the brightest minds, and the experts are left just as amazed by it as the rest of us are. Everything you're about to see in this video is an incredible discovery from a bygone age, but one for which we have no explanation for. Be careful, this video might blow your mind. Almost every civilization in the world has stories and legends about giants, and yet we've never found evidence that a giant species of humans ever existed. Or have we? There have been photographs of enormous human skeletons being excavated from the ground all over the internet since 2004. But no single story about giants ever got as much attention as the one that appeared in the Hindu Voice Monthly in 2007. According to that article, these pictures came from the unearthing of a massive skeleton by a team from National Geographic in India in March 2007. Many people think that the pictures speak for themselves, but it didn't take long for people to start calling them hoaxes or frauds. If this is the work of Photoshop, it must have been a very talented graphic artist. It's not surprising that the world's authorities would want to discourage people from believing the photos are real. So, is it really a fake? Or is the fake story just a cover-up of a truly astonishing discovery? Even in this age of advanced video games, many of us like to sit down with friends or family every now and then to play a good old-fashioned board game. When we do, we're taking part in a form of entertainment that goes back thousands of years, and one which has mysterious origins. Also known as the Game of 20 Squares, the royal game of was first played in ancient Mesopotamia 4,500 years ago. But curiously, an almost identical game was played all over the Middle East and the Mediterranean during times of antiquity. We have no idea of the rules of the game, but it involved both dice and pawns, suggesting it was complicated. Some Babylonian tablets found at the same time as some of the royal game of boards seem to imply that there might even have been an element of fortune-telling involved in the game. Were our ancestors just passing the time when they sat down to play it? Or were they trying to discover the secrets of their futures? This heavily decorated skull looks like the early stages of the process we would go through today to replicate the appearance of a person from their skull. But it's actually an ancient Aztec artifact. There have been several examples of skulls like this found in Mexico, including the Skull of the Smoking Mirror, and they're thought to be depictions of the mighty creator god Tezcatlipoca. A real human skull is used as the base of pieces like this, with the back of the skull cut away so the interior can be lined with fur from a deer. A hinge was also fitted so the jaw, still containing its original teeth, could be moved. Straps would then be fitted into the skull so Aztec priests could wear them during ceremonies. It must have made them appear terrifying, but we can only guess at the purpose of the rituals. What kind of purpose could be served by wearing such frightening headgear? And why did the Aztecs always choose blue turquoise tiles to decorate the skulls with? The color was clearly important, but we'll probably never know why. Scientists are so reluctant to consider the type of technology that went into creating the Yonaguni Monument that they would rather completely ignore it. Ask them and they'll tell you that this ancient Japanese site was created by nature, not nurture. Found underwater below the Ryukyu Islands, this site is more than 10,000 years old and is sometimes described as Japan's answer to the legendary lost city of Atlantis, because it was once above the waves instead of beneath them. While we can't argue that sandstone does occasionally break off in straight lines and block shapes when it erodes, it's less common to see triangle shapes in naturally eroded sandstone. There's no shortage of triangles at Yonaguni, and nor would erosion explain the series of holes that appear to have been drilled into the stones. 4,000-year-old stone tools and pottery fragments have been found at the site, confirming it was once inhabited. But what kind of 10,000-year-old technology could have done this? Who could the builders of the monument possibly have been? Depending on who you believe, the COSO artifact is either a 100-year-old geological anomaly or a riddle that dates back 500,000 years. There's no debate about what sits at the center of the artifact. It's a spark plug, made by the company Champion during the 1920s. Plenty of them have been thrown away over the years, but only this one has managed to find its way right into the center of an iron oxide shell that has been tested and proved to be 500,000 years old. The casing completely surrounds the spark plug, which was discovered by accident in 1961 in California by two prospectors on the hunt for geodes. There's no way that the spark plug could have been pushed into the middle of the rock. So how did the rock form around the shell? With no better explanation available, some people point to the COSO artifact as evidence that time travel is real, and that sometimes time travelers accidentally leave objects behind themselves on their travels. There are as many names for this object as there are theories about its origin. Most people call it the Sabu Disk, but we've also seen it called the Schist Disk and the Saqqara Disk, the latter name being given because it was found in Egypt's North Saqqara in 1936. It looks a lot like a steering wheel, so alien conspiracy theorists like to imagine that it was a control device for an ancient spaceship. Scientists are quick to call that idea ridiculous, but they struggle to come up with a better explanation for how a wheel-shaped object could have turned up in Egypt 5,000 years ago, during a time before Egyptians had even invented the wheel. The soft rock that the artifact is made from would break under the slightest pressure put in the wrong place, and it's only 1 inch thick in places. If it was supposed to be a sculpture, it was made out of the least suitable material for the job. Some people think it might be an ornate candlestick holder, but if so, why haven't we found anything else that looks like it in all the years we've been excavating Egyptian tombs? Sticking with the topic of strange discoveries in the desert, Meatotta, the 6-inch high skeleton from the Atacama Desert that some people believe is the body of a tiny alien. To make it even creepier, the skeleton was found in the churchyard of a deserted town called Lenoria. Testing on the skeleton has revealed that it's less than 100 years old. But so far, we've been unable to say who or where it came from conclusively. Scientists looking for a rational explanation have tried to write it off as a non-viable human fetus, but that wouldn't explain the strange cranium of the body. Another theory is that it's the body of a human who suffered from chronic dwarfism, but the smallest living human ever recorded was 4 times larger than this. Researchers at Stanford University were given 6 whole months to study the body in 2003, but even after all that time, they couldn't come up with a satisfactory explanation for its existence. It's definitely not a hoax, but we may never know what species or race little Atta belonged to. This magnificent bronze sculpture of a horse deserved a better fate than sitting at the bottom of a well in Germany for 2,000 years. But when it finally returned to the surface in 2009, it provoked a lot of controversy. Sculptures like this have been found before, and we can say with reasonable certainty that it once belonged to a much larger statue of the famous Roman Emperor Augustus sat atop the horse. While we can explain that, we can't explain the location it was found in. The discovery was part of a newly uncovered 20-acre ancient Roman site, but the site was curiously devoid of any military buildings. Even more strangely, the Roman site was surrounded on all sides by land belonging to ancient Germanic tribes. The history books have always told us that the Romans expanded by conquering their neighbors and ruling with an iron fist. But the settlement that this horse came from appears to have lived peacefully with its native tribal neighbors. Perhaps the Romans were a little more friendly than we thought. If you want to build something to last, the best approach is to make it out of stone or steel. The ancient sculptures and statues we've dragged out of the ground over the centuries have almost all been crafted from stone. But there is one very notable exception to that rule. This is the Shigir idol. It's more than 11,500 years old, and it spent the majority of that time in a peat bog in the eastern Ural Mountains. The peat turned out to be the perfect preservative for the statue, which is the oldest wooden artifact known to exist anywhere in the world. When it was created by a mysterious civilization during the Mesolithic era, the last ice age had only just come to an end. The 9-foot-high idol was painstakingly put back together by Professor D. Lobanov, following on from its 1894 discovery, but he believed that there might be 3 or 4 pieces missing, so it may once have been even taller. Given the number of different faces that appear on the statue, it might have been used as a totem pole, but as we have no idea who made it, that's only a guess. Imagine this scenario. You're on the beautiful Pompano Beach in Florida, enjoying a walk, and you come across a beautiful blue object sitting on the sand, around the size of a softball. You start to imagine that you found a precious stone or mineral, and it might be your lucky day, and so you go to pick it up, only to discover that instead of being hard and smooth, it's soft and fleshy. After you got over the shock and horror of that feeling, you begin to wonder what it is. And the answer is that we still don't know. The person who found it took it to the Fish and Wildlife Research Institute of Florida for investigation, and they think it's the eye of a dead sea creature. The tiny fragments of bone that cling to the outer shell of the sphere prove that it's neither a squid or a jellyfish, so they suggest that it might have come from a swordfish. We're not sure we buy that explanation. How big must the swordfish have been if the eye alone could fill up the palm of your hand? We know so little about this jade carving that even determining what it's supposed to represent depends upon your own interpretation. Look at it closely. What do you see? A warrior pulling a terrifying face sat on top of a monster, perhaps? Is he supposed to be a god or a mythical beast? If we could say for sure, we might know a little bit more about the civilization who made the carving. That would be useful because they might change a whole lot of what we know about ancient China. The official history of the land says that the Shang dynasty was the first to live in China, around 4,000 years ago. This jade cylinder, however, is at least 1,000 years older than that. Given the relative sophistication of its design, it would be too simplistic to call it the work of a detached tribe or hunter-gatherers. We may therefore have to rewrite the history books and start looking for further evidence of an advanced people living in China before the days of the Shang dynasty, possibly one which based itself around Liangzhu, where the cylinder and its strange carving was found. The discovery of a 15th century skeleton on the Venetian island of Lazaredo Nuovo caused quite a stir in 2012 because it had a stake driven straight through its gaping jaw. At first, the archaeologists working at the site assumed that the poor woman in the grave had suffered a violent death, but further investigation revealed something far stranger. The stake had been hammered through her skull post-mortem. Matteo Borini, who has had the opportunity to examine the body, believes that the body points to a 16th century fear of vampires. During times of plague, bodies were thrown into mass graves to save on space and cost. When the graves were opened to add more bodies, gravediggers were shocked and petrified to see that the hair and fingernails of the previously bodied corpses appeared to have grown. Not only that, thanks to chemical corrosion from the decaying bodies, the burial shrouds appeared to have been shredded and torn. The only conclusion that the people of the time could reach is that the dead weren't staying dead, and so they hammered a stake through them to make sure they didn't claw their way back up to the surface. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!